When it became public knowledge that Jonathan Majors was embroiled in a legal scandal revolving around allegations of domestic abuse, there was one name unrelated to the entire fiasco that kept getting tossed into the mix regardless. No, not Coretta Scott King, Ezra Miller. And on the surface, despite Ezra Miller not having anything to do with the case, it kind of makes sense. There's like a little bit of a connection. Both were high-profile actors who were cast in massive superhero franchises in recurring roles, and as a result were catapulted into the mainstream eye and consciousness, and both were also embroiled in legal scandal and accused of criminal action. And that's kind of it for similarities, but what most people seem to care about is the difference, rather the question of why is Jonathan Majors being punished when Ezra Miller wasn't? How come Jonathan Majors is losing his role as Kang in the MCU when Ezra Miller still got to be the Flash in the Flash movie? Also, if it matters, and I don't think it does and I don't think it should, but this is what I look like. I definitely share more demographics with Ezra Miller than I do with Jonathan Majors. I'm non-binary and Ezra Miller's is as well. I don't think that will lead to any bias, but the source of information is also as important as the information itself, so here we are. Regardless, bias or not, it's impossible to stand in Ezra Miller's corner. Why? Because the main difference between Jonathan Majors and Ezra Miller's alleged crimes is the video quality. Ezra Miller was filmed in basically HD quality, choking then slamming a woman down to the ground.
Did you want to fight? Is that the deal? Whoa, bro.
In the length of time it takes to watch a Vine, this is so shareable and it's so easy to tell what's going on. Whereas with Jonathan Majors, the camera quality of him pushing Grace Jabbari back into the van is very blurry. It's very much the right side of the meme that's here's our photo of the moon and then here's what bank security footage looks like. It's very difficult to tell what's going on here. And to get more context, you then have to watch like 10 more minutes of footage. And to get even more context, you have to watch like another 10 minutes of him having the police show up to his house. It's more difficult to tell what's going on here than it is with Ezra Miller. In the time it takes for me to watch all of the footage for the Jonathan Majors case, I could watch Ezra Miller slamming that woman down to the ground at least 100 times. But if you put these two videos side by side, I think anyone watching them would be able to very quickly say Ezra Miller's guilty. But then when you take a look at Jonathan Majors' video, it kind of requires you to rewind and squint a little bit. While I've come to my own conclusions, and we'll get to that later, I can understand how some people could watch Jonathan Majors' footage and think he's innocent. It seems like there was a scuffle, he tried to put her back in the car, and then he tried to run away. And she was the one chasing him, and from that it seems like she is the one who's the aggressor in this case. And that is a not unreasonable conclusion to come to. I understand how people came to think that. In fact, when I first saw the footage, I was like, I don't even know if I can say one way or the other whether I think this is just a guy trying to end a kerfuffle before it starts, or whether he's like being too rough with her as he like, is this a shove back in the car or is he putting her back in the car? I can't tell. And Jonathan Majors looks more and more innocent as more and more like evidence starts to trickle out. In the secretly recorded conversation that Grace Jabbari had with Jonathan Majors, he essentially compares himself to Obama and MLK by asking Jabbari to be like Coretta Scott King and to be like Michelle Obama.
Coretta Scott King. You know who that is? That's Martin Luther King's wife. Michelle Obama. Barack Obama's wife. All that said, right, and I'm not saying I'm a great man. A great man. I am doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and for the world.
And while it is like cringe and goofy and definitely weird, it's not an immediate sign that he was an abusive partner. And I've seen people talk a lot about the chase, a lot about the footage of the cops showing up, a lot about how Grace Jabbari is drunk a lot of the time, and she is. I haven't seen many people talk about the text messages. There are text messages from 2022, the year previous to like the big incident that started all of this, that were admitted into court as evidence recently, or at least partially as evidence. Some of the texts have redacted elements to them. Thursday, 22nd of September, 8:11. It's just fake, and I fear you have no perspective of what could happen if you go to the hospital. They will ask you questions, and as I don't think you could actually protect us, it could lead to an investigation, even if you do lie and they suspect something. Redacted. I will tell the doctor I bumped my head if I go. I'm going to give it one more day, but I can't sleep and I need some stronger painkillers. That's all. Why would I tell them what really happened when it's clear I want to be with you? I feel like you want to be together, as in to not embarrass yourself for everything you've said to your friends and family. Last night, I considered killing myself versus coming home. You said you needed love last night, and I put my feelings aside and tried to give you that. I need love too. Or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man that I don't deserve it and should just kill myself. This way of existence is miserable. I want to, and I assume the word there is die, but this is just an assumption, I can't see it properly. Huge wall of redacted text from Grace Jabbari, and then, I will not go to the doctor if you don't feel safe with me doing so, or don't trust me to. I promise I would never mention you, but I understand your fear. And then another redacted element. You can't reject love if there is no real love. It's just lip service. I gave you love last night and this morning before I got out of bed. When you got up, you were not full of love at all. I didn't feel it at all. You could have just given me a hug, or walked close to me, or asked me if you could give me a hug, not the other way around. It works both ways. I will probably kill myself. It's not really contemplating anymore. I'm a monster, horrible man, not capable of love. I am killing myself soon. I've already put things in motion. So it's not looking amazing. Even if you put your head in the sand and refuse to read between the lines, you at least have to acknowledge that the threats of suicide in order to coerce her into acting a certain way is emotional abuse. The National Domestic Violence Hotline categorizes threatening suicide against a partner as emotional abuse. Is this something you can go to court for? No, but does it at least provide a more stable foundation than everything else we've seen in regards to Jonathan Majors' behavior? Yeah. And just to get ahead of the comment that will say something like, oh, so I can't tell my partner or loved ones that I'm thinking about committing suicide if I am suicidal? I can't tell people, I can't communicate that I want to end my own life? If you're feeling suicidal, you can say to your partner, hey, it's been tough lately. I've been contemplating suicide. I could really use your support. I want to stay around here longer. Love you. Cool. This is not what Jonathan Majors did. And then if we take a step back and look between the lines and look at the subtext, he definitely hit her or something enough to cause damage to her that would make him worried about her going to the hospital. And her having to say, I won't tell the truth about what happened, instead I'll just say I hit my head. It's not looking good. Once again, is this event the one that he's in court for? No. But does this event occurring and do these text messages being admitted without Jonathan Majors saying anything like, oh, those redacted bits were us saying, are you ready to consensually practice the lines for my new play? It makes it more likely that he has been violent with her again and was possibly violent with her again during this 2023 incident. Can I tell if him grabbing her here was enough to sprain her finger and cause a laceration on one of her ears, as was recorded in the medical report? I don't know. The driver of the car initially said that it was Jabbari doing everything, but then also says a sentence that kind of makes it seem like that's not true. And then the doctor, who initially looked at the injuries on Jabbari, initially said that they seemed consistent with like someone being grabbed and twisted, but then in court said actually these seem inconsistent with like a person being grabbed in this way. It's hard to tell. But alright, we've set like a framework for Jonathan Majors, and we've had to do like a lot of work to do so, as opposed to Ezra Miller. Whoa. But then that kind of gets us into, you know, Jonathan Majors and Ezra Miller both got into legal trouble. Why did Jonathan Majors lose his Kang role when Ezra Miller still got to be the Flash?
I am the Flash. I am Kang!
I think we're all forgetting, first of all, Jonathan Majors still got to be Kang in Loki Season 2, which was recorded before the allegations but released after the allegations. In the same way that Ezra Miller still got to be the Flash, which was recorded before the allegations and then released after. So when I was recording this video, I assumed that the Flash movie had been filmed before the choking incident with Ezra Miller and then released afterwards, after like years and years of production hell. But it turns out that the Flash movie was filmed after the Reykjavik, Iceland choking incident. So there is a question of like, yeah, Ezra Miller could have been recast. Grant Gustin was right there. People would have freaked out. Like, it could have been a great financial decision in addition to a great moral decision. Does the like multiverse element of the movie make a little bit less sense as a result? Is it less cohesive? Sure, but your universe is ending anyway, and you make a better moral decision. So I stand a little bit less behind the decision for Ezra Miller to at least reprise their role in The Flash, but I do stand by the fact that I don't think Ezra Miller will continue to be The Flash. We're never going to see Ezra Miller in a big acting role again. While there wasn't like an actual statement that came out saying we are dropping Ezra Miller as the Flash, in the same way that there was with Disney saying we are dropping Jonathan Majors from the MCU, we're not going to see Ezra Miller as the Flash again. It takes like a special kind of brain dead to think that like money-minded executives in corporations who are in charge of making money and who just want to buy more yachts, not saying that's a good thing, just saying that this is what they're like, it takes a special type of brain dead to think that they would spend $200 million? Really? Jesus Christ, how? And then be like, actually, our lead actor is kind of problematic. It's very problematic. And they should be let go. In fact, we should just scrap the entire movie. We're okay losing money on this. Although we should never forget that Flash production designer Paul Astorberry said that people will forget that when asked about how Ezra Miller's criminal history would affect the film's performance. Now obviously the big difference between Ezra Miller and Jonathan Majors that people who care about this latch onto is that Ezra Miller is queer and white passing, or just white. Is Ezra Miller just white? Ezra Miller identifies as Jewish. Their mother is not Jewish, but their father is. And then Jonathan Majors is black and a man.
I'm a great man.
In regards to Ezra Miller being queer and people thinking that they got away with it because they're queer, the US legal and justice system famously is not ruling in favor of queer people. I'm not going to get into it because that could be a video in itself, but just look it up. I don't know if like gay people have it as bad as black people in cases regarding the US justice system. Probably not, because it's more difficult to be visibly gay or queer than it is to be visibly black. In the same way that when people are like, oh, the Irish suffered in America too, it's like, alright, if you get an Irish person and a black person and make them stand 100 feet away from me, I'm always going to be able to pick the black person out of the crowd, and then I won't be able to tell that that person's Irish from 100 feet away. I just won't. If there is any legal favoritism occurring between these two specific people, it's not going to be because Ezra Miller is queer, it would be because Ezra Miller is white passing and Jonathan Majors is black. So let's talk about that.
Lyndon B. Johnson. His quote is, if you want to convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you.
The most divisive class difference in the USA is not between white and black, gay or straight or cis versus trans or men versus women. It's between the rich and the poor. And the more that the rich can convince the poor and the middle class that the sources of friction within our country lie between all of those other demographics and not between the rich and the poor, the more they win and the more that they distract us from the real issues at hand. So, does Jonathan Majors, being rich, give him more legal protection than the average person? In the US, which is one of 2 countries that uses the bail system, yeah, when bail is a flat rate of like $500 for misdemeanors, that will be easier for the Hollywood superstar versus the person making minimum wage. However, it is an unfortunate fact that the public at large will often see blackness before they see richness. Take, for example, Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther, having the cops called on him for trying to withdraw money from his own bank. Think of every news article that you see like once every couple months of a black man being arrested or having the cops called on him for trying to get into his own house or car. Like, yeah, O.J. Simpson, maybe this is a bad example, but O.J. Simpson did commit murder. But the reason the public was, well, not the public, but reason part of the public was on his side, and the reason he got away with it is because the police, despite all the evidence against him, still planted more false evidence against him. And when it comes to Jonathan Majors, do I think that he got more of an unfair deal than lots of other actors or singers or people in the public eye who have also been through similar allegations? I think so, yeah. Before the texts were released, which were like my major thing for thinking that Jonathan Majors was guilty, I think when it was just news that he was going to court for domestic abuse allegations and when like videos hadn't been released or anything, the public at large was very ready to cancel him. And in comparison to other celebrities who've done the exact same or worse, it did kind of seem like Jonathan Majors got jumped like out of nowhere. For example, Jonathan Majors was uninvited from the 2023 Met Gala, despite the theme revolving around Me Too denying immigrant-hating Karl Lagerfeld, and despite actual legit sex cult leader Jared Leto being present. Taking into consideration that Jonathan Majors was basically dropped from everything even before the abuse allegations were confirmed, do I think that that happened like because he was black? I'm having a hard time picturing people purposely thinking Jonathan Majors is black, therefore we should cancel him. But there is always latent internal racism that people have regardless of how non-racist they think they are. But I mean, similar things happened with Justin Roiland and Armie Hammer. Like with Justin Roiland, there was at least a bit more evidence regarding the sexual harassment and also the DMs he sent to minors. But I think the public was also just like, yeah, we assume the texts are real. Justin Roiland, definitely guilty. Jonathan Majors, in my eyes, definitely guilty. But then the same thing sort of happened with Armie Hammer, at least in the public consciousness, where the text messages with Armie Hammer saying that he wanted to cook a girl's rib and eat it came out, and we canceled him pretty quickly for that one. But then I did a bit more research and nothing really came of that one. Not saying that he was innocent, but if you do your own research in your own time, because this video is not about Armie Hammer, it doesn't seem that he's like as provably guilty. Just while we're talking about punishments for crimes, whether they're disproportionate or not, remember back when like Tiger Woods got caught cheating on his wife and the world like shunned him? John Mulaney in like the last couple of years left his wife for another woman and then continued on to make another comedy special about how much of a drug addict he is, to a great success.
When I walked into my intervention, I knew immediately that it was an intervention. Do you know how bad of a drug problem you have to have if when you open a door and see people gathered, your first and immediate thought is probably an intervention about my drug problem?
Could it have been anti-black sentiment against Tiger Woods for how quickly we all ganged up against him? Maybe, yeah, possibly. But I think this is also just a showcase of like how our values change and how badly we want to punish people for treading upon those values. Something else to keep in mind is that a celebrity's public persona will also play a factor in how their crimes will be handled by their fans and by the community at large. For example, Seth Rogen, James Franco, Snoop Dogg smoking weed 20 years ago, no one really bats an eye at that. But when Michael Phelps and Miley Cyrus got caught doing it, that was basically career ending for a couple of years. I say a couple of years because they both made comebacks. And I think Jonathan Majors and Ezra Miller might eventually make comebacks. People love a good comeback story. Louis C.K., who forced a woman into a corner and then masturbated in front of her, made a comeback. So I don't think it's over for Jonathan Majors and Ezra Miller. They definitely will have a chance to redeem themselves in the public eye. Is it anytime soon? No. Did Jonathan Majors fumble a big bag? For sure, but it's not over. Like, the public can only care about so many things at once. Black Lives Matter, Israel versus Palestine, I'm very much pro-Palestine, sexual abuse, abuse of power, minimum wage. There's so many issues to care about, and they're all going to have different levels of people caring about them at any given time. And sometimes a celebrity does one thing and the public just happens not to care about that one thing at the moment because we're focused on the other 3 or 4. And sometimes a celebrity does a different thing at a different time, and then that's the thing that the public happens to care about. Right now, in the post-Me Too society, we care more about sexual abuse and abuse of power of people in Hollywood. People who abuse their positions of power should be punished. With that being said, some people think that we're not doing that enough.
I film myself when I get assaulted for NFT crypto art. What's your name? What's your badge number? Tell me your name and your badge number. White key.
Ezra.
Full name, full badge number. I'm being arrested for disorderly conduct?
Yeah.
So what did I do wrong?
Getting arrested for disorderly conduct. Somebody's face.
Doing something illegal doesn't mean you automatically get sent to prison. For example, maybe you don't get caught. And even if you do get caught, there's a few other factors that come into play before you are imprisoned. Maybe you pay bail. Maybe the person who originally charged you drops their charges. Maybe you settle out of court. Ezra Miller has committed several legal scandals, like a lot, and is not in jail. People will think that's unfair. I kind of agree, but let's take a look at why they're not in jail. First, let's talk about the choking incident, which is kind of the first major legal issue that Ezra Miller had, disregarding a marijuana possession incident, but we all smoke. So one thing I didn't know about the choking incident was that it occurred in Reykjavik, in Iceland. But I also imagine that the woman herself, the one who was choked and slammed to the ground, did not press charges. And from what I can understand, the staff of the restaurant was more interested in just getting Ezra Miller off the premises than they were in charging them with anything. I work at a liquor store next to a bar, and while fights aren't common, when they do happen, it's more valuable to us in that moment to just get them off property. So that was April 6th, 2020. Moving forward a couple of years, we are in Hawaii. Apparently, from March 7th through March 28th of 2022, Miller was the subject of 10 calls to the police because of various minor incidents, such as loitering or filming people in public without their permission. However, on March 28th, Ezra Miller was arrested because of a physical altercation at a bar. Miller later claimed that they became enraged after being accosted by a Nazi. The Hawaii Police Assistant Chief Kenneth stated that Miller's outrage was caused by patrons of the bar singing Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper's song Shallow. Let me just play this because I don't think I know what this song is like, and if I don't fly into a rage within 10 seconds, I don't know what to tell you, Ezra Miller. Never mind, my internet is not working. However, Miller claimed to have filmed the incident, so the footage could later be used as NFT crypto art. Anyway, Ezra paid $500 in bail, which is why they are not in jail. They paid bail, which, like I touched on earlier, is more rich privilege than anything else. But from what I can understand, paying $500 bail is fairly standard because Ezra was arrested for harassment and disorderly conduct, which are misdemeanors. Misdemeanors, at least in Hawaii, but I think in most states, can carry up to a year in jail. But this does not seem to be common. Like, that seems to be a pretty... Oh my god, you could either pay $500 or spend up to a year in jail? That's wild. But yeah, in fact, while Jonathan Majors has not been convicted yet, and as many headlines say, is facing up to a year in jail, I think lots of people read that as Jonathan Majors is going to spend a year in jail, which I get. Facing a year in jail, it seems like he's within the doorway of the cell and is about to walk in. But no, that's just like the upper limit of what Jonathan Majors could be punished with. He might just have to pay $500, which would be really funny. As we continue, April 19th, probably 2022 still, Miller was taken into custody for second-degree assault. They were arrested for throwing a chair which hit a 26-year-old woman and left a half-inch cut on her forehead. So this is the kicker, because we do actually now have some concrete legal terminology to compare to each other. Ezra Miller was charged with second-degree assault, which is more severe than the one charge of misdemeanor third-degree assault and the one charge of second-degree harassment that Jonathan Majors was charged with. Also, I remember the Shallow song now. I like it. It's good. It's solid. The other legal difference is that Jonathan Majors pleaded not guilty to 4 charges that were brought against him. There were 2 others. And then Ezra Miller pleaded no contest. No contest is essentially the same as guilty without some ramifications, but it basically means that you're not trying to fight the charges. And a no contest is usually part of a plea bargain, so it means that Miller took a plea bargain where Jonathan Majors did not. And then when it comes to the grooming that Ezra Miller was definitely doing, I'm not even going to say allegations. Ezra Miller was definitely grooming some kids. The parents of the kids in question just wanted restraining orders against Ezra Miller. They didn't press charges. So you can't exactly go to jail just because someone wants you a certain distance away from them. Laws are weird. Now we'll get to the last of Ezra Miller's big crimes. God, I've been talking for so long about Ezra Miller's crimes. But on August 7th, 2022, Miller was arrested for felony burglary, which could lead to life in prison. Ezra Miller initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, which would have led them into the same kerfuffle that Jonathan Majors got himself into by pleading not guilty, and we'll still get to that. But the day before the scheduled hearing, Ezra changed their mind, I guess, or maybe was told by their legal representation to do something different, and they pleaded guilty to trespassing, which led to the other charges of petite larceny and burglary being dropped. But as a result of pleading guilty to the one thing, they were not exonerated, but they were not charged with the other things, and as a result got a lesser sentence, which is the power that pleading guilty will get you, and is why so many, not saying that Miller is innocent, but it is why so many innocent people will give false confessions to the cops and to detectives and to investigators when they know that they're innocent, because the detectives are so gung-ho on it being this person that the innocent person's like, well, fuck it, I guess I'll say that I'm guilty if it means that I just have to spend 5 years in prison instead of 25. Once again, I don't know if I've said it before, legal system, very weird. From what I can understand, Jonathan Majors going to trial for a misdemeanor assault case was an odd choice, and it's kind of what led him to facing the possibility of jail time that we've been hearing about. So why is misdemeanor assault such a weird thing to go to court for? It's, in the eyes of the law, pretty small. I think in an attempt to save his career, Majors was putting all of the money onto a not guilty verdict, hoping that if he came out of this squeaky clean, fully not guilty of all 4 charges, that he would either get his rules back, or the public at large would be more forgiving. And then I guess that just wasn't the right move, because it did not work out for him. But truly, it is as simple as, if Jonathan Majors had taken a plea deal, he would not be facing jail time. He would have gotten a lesser sentence. He might have just had to pay $500 as a fine or as bail. But yeah, plea deals, if you take them, means you get a lighter sentence, means that the trial doesn't go to court, which means there's less publicity, and it means you save yourself some time and you save everyone else some time. On the downside, you now have a criminal record. You waive your right to appeal, which means that if you're found guilty, you can no longer go to a higher court and say, hey, I think this court, the one that prosecuted me, I think they fucked up. Can we just do this again? And it also means that you said that you're guilty on record. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, hey, this plea deal system sounds kind of weird in general, Does it not just incentivize innocent people to plead guilty? Well, yeah, it fucking does. The US legal system does not really reward justice. It rewards bodies in prisons, and it rewards conviction rates. The more people who plead guilty, the higher the conviction rate for prosecutors, the more likely they are to be promoted or to get a raise. So that's why Ezra Miller is not in jail. And that's why Jonathan Majors might be going. I'll be honest, this case wasn't exactly like high on the list of things I was caring about at the time that this became public knowledge. But as like more people began to talk about it, for some reason they were also talking about Ezra Miller, and I just couldn't comprehend. Like, there was a corner of the online community where, when discussing this case, became so childish so fast. There was a sentiment of, well, this one other person got away with it from what we can tell. So what the fuck? Why is this person not getting away with it? This person shouldn't get punished if that person didn't get punished. Like, no, like sometimes people don't get punished as properly as we think they should. That doesn't mean we need to keep dropping the ball in future cases. Like the next woman who was brought to court and found guilty after she killed her own child following the Casey Anthony verdict was probably like, ugh. This is so unfair. Anything can seem unfair if you take one single variable and compare it to one other single variable. Like, yeah, if you compare Jonathan Majors to Ezra Miller, actually that comparison doesn't even make sense anymore because Ezra Miller still lost their job. It wasn't as public, the Warner Bros. Wasn't as vocal, but Ezra Miller is not going to be the Flash in the same way that Jonathan Majors is not going to continue to be king. If you compare Majors to Armie Hammer, Justin Roiland, Shia LaBeouf, fucking Chris Brown, who averages an assault case once a year, it goes up and down. The variance with which we hold people accountable, both like in the court of the public and the court of the court, it varies. It shifts based on like how popular you are, how mad people want to be at you, how good your music is, how good you dance, I guess. Hell, Disney dropped James Gunn back when those tweets of his resurfaced, when he had already apologized for the tweets years before the firing. I think Jonathan Majors is just suffering from a couple of things called, first of all, abusing your partner, and second of all, doing it at the wrong time as a Hollywood star. If he'd done this back in like the early 2000s, late 90s, oh man, we would not be hearing about it. Regardless of whether Jonathan Majors is innocent or not, I don't think he is, but regardless, I just don't comprehend how Ezra Miller got dragged into this. It does ring of a very shallow, not homophobia, but like a non-binary phobia, of just like a queer phobia in general, of like, well, we know why that they, them got away with it. Once again, they didn't. If anything, I hope this video was just more helpful in a broader sense, because at a certain point of researching this, I realized it's not really about Jonathan Majors or Ezra Miller. It's about the US justice system and how fucked it is. Anyway, I personally don't want to make another video about these people. But if you want to help me choose the next video topic, go check out my Patreon. I'll be conducting polls for anyone who contributes $1 a month. The fate of my channel is within your hands. You hold the balance of topics within your tiny little grubby little mitts. It's a fantastic god complex that I'm gifting to you for but a mere $1 a month. Anyway, thanks to Alexis LaRoche Marin, Jonathan Youngblood, Havila, and Madeline Goke for being my only 4 Patreon subscribers. And thank you for watching this. I'm stressed.